Joining me now with reaction is U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. Jamieson, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here this morning. You were in the room. Can you tell us a little about how the hearing played out?
Sure, happy to do it, and great to be with you, Maria. I spent yesterday morning in what I call the Super Bowl of trade law, the Supreme Court case on the President's tariff authority. I would say that the justices had mostly fair questions, tough questions. They certainly were tough on the government, but I think anyone who went and saw the second half, which a lot of people turned it off after hearing the government's case, the justices were quite difficult and quite tough on the plaintiffs here. As your correspondent there noted, the plaintiff's position, it has some absurdity to it in that they believe IEEPA, the statute at question, would allow the president to completely embargo trade with a country, in other words, stop trade with the country, but not slow it through use of a tariff, and that's an absurd outcome.
Yeah, that does sound absurd, that the president would be able to stop trade but wouldn't be able to slow it with tariffs.
That's exactly right. I mean, the reality is, when you read that statute, the language is incredibly broad. And the justices, pretty much all of them, noted the breadth of the language. They noted that the court starts with an analysis of the plain language of the statute. That's what you look at before you start to try to put a different gloss on it or look at history or other things. You look at the plain language, and the plain language says you can regulate imports, and regulation of imports is almost always done through a tariff.
Now, this issue has been certainly one of the talking points on Wall Street, and there's one analyst at Piper Sandler, Andy LaPerriere, who talked about this a long time ago. He actually told his clients many, many months ago that he did believe that the Supreme Court would ultimately rule that the president does not have unlimited authority to impose tariffs under the IEEPA or emergency lever. What are your plans, backup plans, if in fact it does go against you? Jamieson, I know this morning we've been talking about things like Section 112, Section 232, Section 301 and 338 in the Constitution. Are you looking at things like that in terms of recreating that kind of revenue?
Well, the first thing I would say, I don't know Andy, but the president has never purported to have unlimited authority in this area, and in fact, his execution of tariffs has limitations. There are certain things you can't tariff. Congress gets to have a say on all of this, so there are limitations. Are there other statutes where the president can impose tariffs? Of course there are. He used IEEPA because it was absolutely the best fit for the emergency we're facing with the trade deficit and the offshoring of manufacturing. It gives the flexibility that the president needs. I mean, you're facing an emergency, so you need emergency powers. I think if you look at what's gone on with China over the past several months, anyone who thinks we don't have an economic emergency with respect to our trade relations, I think they're living under a rock.
Yeah, these are all really important points that you're making. And to that point, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, your colleague who was with you in the room yesterday, said he's optimistic the court will uphold the president's trade authority, saying that the ruling carrying massive implications, potentially impacting hundreds of billions in tariff revenue, setting new limits on presidential powers on trade. Jamieson, how much money are we talking about here? Because when I spoke with the president just a couple of weeks ago, I asked the president for backup plans, and here's what he said to me. Watch this.
What is your backup plan should the Supreme Court decision go against you on the tariffs and the emergency?
Well, I'll have to figure something out. I don't want to even think about it. We're doing so well to think about it. If that happened, we'd have to pay back money. So if anything would happen with that, that would mean they're allowed to use tariffs and we're not. If they took away, this is national security, if they took away tariffs, then they've taken away our national security.
So, Jamieson, how much money are we talking about? Are you right now expecting that if this goes against you, that the U.S. will have to pay, what, $150, $200 billion in money back to corporate America? How would that work?
So this year, the president has imposed tariffs under a number of different legal authorities. He's collected, nearing $300 billion this year. A good portion of that came in under tariffs that were not the subject of yesterday's case,
okay.
Section 232, other national security tariffs. So the reciprocal tariffs that were at issue yesterday, I don't have the exact number, but it's over 100 billion, but I think it's going to be less than 200 billion or thereabouts. The court itself signaled that, what do you do in the case that the tariffs are overruled? What do you do with that money? I mean, in some situations, the plaintiffs Specific plaintiffs will get a refund. As for the rest of it, I'll hand that file to the Secretary of the Treasury. He's the one who has all that money in the General Treasury, and you'll have all these importers and importing interests who are going to want that money back. And so, we'll have to figure out probably with the court what kind of a schedule might look like, and what the rights are of these parties, and what rights the government has to that money.
When are you expecting a decision on this, Jamieson?
Well, the president asked for expedited treatment. It's incredibly important that we know sooner rather than later,
Yes.
His authorities here. So, I think a lot of folks are saying this may come before the end of the year. I think that's probably right. We know that on a normal schedule, the court may not release, its rulings until spring or even as late as June. My guess is they'll do it sooner than that. And whatever happens, we'll be ready for next steps.
Jamieson, let me move on to China and this big deal that you were able to secure because of President Trump meeting with Xi Jinping and Secretary Bessent and your meetings with your counterparts as well. China is now easing some of its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. farm goods as part of that new trade deal. Last week, however, soybeans are still facing a 13% duty and a 10% tariff on most U.S. imports. Beijing also suspending new export controls on rare earth metals, ending investigations into chip makers. Can you talk to us a little about what was most important? I mean, for the U.S. side, we need to see those rare earth magnets flow, as well as the rest of the world, as the president has made that point many times. In response, what did the U.S. have to give up?
Well, when we went into those negotiations, we really had three specific goals and one overarching goal. The overarching goal is to have stability in our relationship with China. President Trump and President Xi want this. They want to have a type of relationship where we can be cooperative and not confrontational. And some of the specific goals we had, one, we needed to have those flows of rare earth unimpeded, like you mentioned. It's important for our industrial base and the world's industrial base, because China imposed this on the world, or threatened to at least. Second, we wanted to make sure that China resumed purchases of American goods, particularly a lot of our ag products that have China as a core destination. And third, we wanted to secure Chinese cooperation on fentanyl controls, which we've secured. What did the United States do on its part? We had some investigations and things related to port fees or export controls extending to affiliates of Chinese companies. We took a pause on those measures for further review. We also reduced the tariff on China by 10 percentage points because of their fentanyl cooperation. But remember, we still have anywhere from 45 to 50% tariffs on China at this time.
And at the same time, there was also a new rule in terms of expanding the entities list, which you said that you would put aside for a year. Is that right? How does that affect Chinese companies? Was that a priority for the Chinese side?
So that was something that was important to the Chinese side. That was really a procedural rule. It wasn't China specific. For 40 years, the United States in implementing export controls, right, controlling technology that can go to certain companies or countries overseas, you do it based on the specific name of a company. The United States said, well, we want to make sure that we're covering the field here. So if there's a subsidiary that's 50% or more owned by one of these listed entities, they should be covered too. We implemented that rule. It ended up covering a huge swath of companies, not just in China, but in other countries as well. And so we paused that rule. And so we'll just continue with our 40-year practice with export controls as opposed to this procedural move.
Well, look, you've also been pushing, and the president has been aggressive in pushing corporate America to get the supply chains to America and make sure that America is less reliant on the supply chains out of communist China. How long are you expecting that to take? Because at some point, is the U.S. going to be able to refine those rare earth minerals on its own?
Yes, the answer is yes. With the United States, as well as its allies and partners around the world, we are already proceeding to reshore or nearshore rare earth production. Remember, you have the mining, you have the processing and refining, and then you have the manufacturing of the magnets. And these are the steps that we're focused on. You have a lot of these types of mines and facilities in the U.S., but they've been mothballed for 10, 15, 20 years. We're trying to get those back online. And then you have new deposits all over the place, certainly in America, but also in places like Australia. and the president's been going around concluding a memorandum of understanding with a variety of countries with respect to critical minerals and rare earths, about working together to explore these deposits, get processing up and running, and make sure that the economics make sense so these companies can get a return on their investment. It can be economically feasible to produce rare earths right here in America.
And so many companies are relying on that. We spoke with, the CEO of Therabody earlier, and he said, look, we need these rare earths. I mean, this is a company that's making, wellness products, and, you don't initially think about that, but it's not just, corporate America, it's also government, whereas we need those rare earths for the military, right?
Yes, and that's what's so frustrating about the Chinese export controls or proposals. When the United States or other countries impose export controls, it's almost always on the highest tech products that we have. I mean, we make all kinds of semiconductors. 95% of them you can ship to China, no problem. There's just a very small set that you don't ship. On the other hand, what China's doing with rare earths, they're purporting to control a very basic technology that the United States pioneered 60 years ago, something that Japan makes. I mean, these are basic inputs into the industrial processes. They're important, but they're not the highest tech thing in the world. The Chinese managed to take control of them largely because of our policy decisions and offshoring all of that production to China. So they're not controlling their highest tech stuff. They're controlling basic inputs for industry worldwide. And that's why it's so concerning that they're trying to do that.
And of course, it was concerning when they came out with the threat that they were going to limit the export of the rare earth minerals, not just for the United States, but the point that you've made and the president has made so many times, that it's the world. Everyone needs those. Should the entity list Chinese companies have access to our capital markets? I mean, the president has a lot of levers to pull. He always says, well, I want China to do well as I want the United States to do well. I'm not going to put them in a corner right now. But, I mean, aren't there other more serious and aggressive levers that the U.S. can pull, like yanking those companies off of our exchanges? Wouldn't that put a real scare into the Chinese Communist Party to stop making such threats?
I mean, yes, there are a vast amount of levers that one could exercise, that the president could exercise with respect to the Chinese. There's that kind of thing you're talking about, delisting. There are tax treaties out there that give Chinese companies operating in the U.S. special benefits. There are other export controls on key inputs that the Chinese need. But that's not the goal. The goal is not to have mutually assured economic destruction between China and the United States right now.
Right.
The goal is to have stability and mutual benefit. And the president, in his wisdom, has given the Chinese a window of opportunity where we can work on that project, as opposed to the confrontational approach, which I don't think anybody really wants.
Yes, very, very good. Let me get your take on the impact of this shutdown, Jamieson. Day 37 of this shutdown, the longest in history, obviously. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy is now saying that the FAA does plan to cut 10% of U.S. flights at 40 major airports. He warned us about this 2 weeks ago, telling us that people were calling in sick and they're working without pay. Something's got to give. Senate Democrats are divided on whether to strike a deal with Republicans to reopen government. What is your expectation of the impact on this from this shutdown on the economy?
Well, I mean, listen, anytime you're having to curtail transportation, which is one of the great advantages we have in the United States, we have this vast internal market, we have great transportation systems and networks and hubs, but when that's hobbled because the Democrats won't open the government, obviously that's going to have an economic impact just on economic activity. I mean, it's just crazy to me. So I'm hoping that we can move forward, that the rational Democrats can, join their few colleagues that have voted for it, and then we can get this government reopened and get the country humming.
Yeah, I mean, Frontier CEO is telling passengers to buy back tickets on another airline so that they can avoid getting stranded. And I spoke with Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy just a week ago and asked him how bad it will get. Watch this. Is it even safe to fly right now, Secretary?
That's job number one, Maria. And again, I need my controllers focused on the airspace, not about the finances at home. They'll tell me there is that seepage of how are they going to deal with those finances. My job is to keep the airspace safe. And so if I don't feel like I have enough controllers or enough controllers that are focused, we will slow down traffic. We will stop traffic. And that's why you see the delays in the system.
I mean, Jamieson, look what's going on here. I mentioned the CEO of Frontier, Barry Biffle. He's telling passengers, buy a backup ticket. buy another ticket just in case, so you don't get stranded. Jamieson, your assessment of where we are here, do you think the government opens next week?
Well, listen, I've talked to a few senators this week, and I've heard hope and I've heard optimism. I think we all have to take a healthy dose of cynicism at the same time. When you hear the Democrats really trying to leverage the shutdown for political points, did they want to have the shutdown going into the elections earlier this week? Is that something they wanted to leverage? I mean, I think the American people see through this. I think they understand that the Republicans are just trying to get a clean CR through, continuing resolution that has Democrat priorities, Republican priorities. So at some point, the American people are going to get fed up with this, especially when it starts affecting their daily life, whether it's flights or otherwise. So, on the one hand, I'm optimistic. And in fact, the idea that the American people are going to start feeling the effects sooner rather than later, I think even the Democrats are going to have to come across the aisle and start making the decisions right for the country.
It's quite extraordinary. And, the second longest shutdown was during President Trump's first term, when the Democrats staged another fight, trying to create chaos for this president. Back to trade for a moment. Let me get your take on the other deals that need to be done. Where are you on Canada? Where are you on any other? I mean, the president has done so many deals on trade and has traveled the world with obviously an incredible reception across the world. But in terms of business and your portfolio, what's left?
Sure. So you may have seen earlier this week, the president sent out a message on Truth Social mentioning progress with Switzerland on a deal with Switzerland. We met with them this week and have been for several weeks. What's really exciting about that potential deal is the opportunity for more manufacturing in the United States, where Swiss companies are quite eager to come here and do things in terms of pharmaceutical manufacturing, aircraft and aircraft parts, even gold smelting, something that Switzerland is quite famous for, and of course opening their market in a greater way. So we're in close conversations with the Swiss. We're having a lot of discussions with some of our Western Hemisphere partners in Central America and elsewhere. I've been speaking with the Mexicans quite a bit as well. And so I think you're going to start seeing the president's strategy continue to take shape. You saw it last week in Asia as he struck deals with a number of Southeast Asian and East Asian countries. You'll see it again this month in the Western Hemisphere and elsewhere.
And of course, one of the most powerful parts of the president's agenda is opening up the spigot of oil and gas. We just went to the Permian Basin and we were able to see fracking and how important oil and gas is to America, probably arguably one of our most important natural resources. Are you expecting selling that oil and gas across the world to become a more important piece as well?
Yes, because as we're going around to these countries, we're making it clear that we're very concerned about the U.S. global trade deficit, and certain countries are particular offenders in that point. And when we talk to them about reversing that deficit quickly, obviously we want to open their markets, and we've been leveraging President Trump's tariffs to do just that. We've been deterring their imports through those tariffs, but they're also offering to buy liquefied natural gas, propane, a variety of U.S. energy products as a way to quickly get the offtake that can flip the trend in the trade deficit the United States has with the world. And that's mutually beneficial, right? That's great for our oil patch. It's great for those countries who are looking to have cheap and expensive but plentiful energy for their countries. I mean, everyone needs more energy now, whether it's for their AI, for their data centers, and the United States can provide it.
Yeah, and what I learned when I was on the ground in Permian is that we have a lot of natural gas, but we don't have the pipeline infrastructure to distribute it. Some of these companies are actually flaring up natural gas because they don't have a way to get it to where it needs to go, even in the face of this huge need for AI data centers. Jamieson, it's a great portfolio and an agenda. We're going to be watching it closely. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thank you, Maria.
All right, Jamieson Greer joining us. That is why the president has his regulatory platform as well, to make it easier to get those pipelines and permitting done with regard to natural gas. Stay with us. We'll be right back.